And we're off. Hey everyone. What's up, you guys? How are you all doing today? What's up, Hope? How's it going? What's up, Nikki? Nice of you to join. Hey, Dee. What's up, Mikel? Mikel? Hey, Cactus. We are live. Happy Independence Day. Happy 4th of July, guys. It is a great country. This is a great country, and it is our Independence Day. USA. USA. What's up? Look what I have. Do you guys know? Hold on. Ugh. Give me one sec. Look what I have. Yay! Do you guys know Doraemon? Yeah. This was the shit back in the day. Not this food. It's the the manga. The manga. It's I grew up on that. I grew up on Doraemon. What's up, Dishy Panda? Bean Poon. Yeah. Yeah, this is a cool manga. Very old. If you want to go read it, I recommend it. But this character, Doraemon's favorite food is this. Storayaki. Alright, so let's see how it tastes. It's drugs. Alright. Let's see what Doraemon likes. Is it bread? No, it's like a cake with some cream inside. I wonder what's filled. No. It's red bean paste. It's really good. And Doraemon loves this shit. Not bad. It's sweet, but not too sweet. Just the way I like it. It seems like a snack that you can just eat forever because it's so light and fluffy. Asian snacks scare you. Why? Most of them are good. Some of them not so much. But yeah, go to like an Asian store, an Asian supermarket, and buy some snacks. This is really good. Rate it? I'm gonna say an 8. Yeah. 7.5, 7.5, or an 8. How about that? Yeah, it's really good. Alright. Enough of that. You know what? I'm just gonna finish it. Oh Jesus. Give me a few seconds. I gotta swallow this. I need to do voice acting. I don't know about that. Don't know about that, Chief. I'm not a very good voice actor. Voice actors are amazing. Like, not only can they do different voices, but they can remember which voice goes with which character. Yeah. And they'll recall it, and then they'll just do the character voice. that's very hard for me. Like I forget which voice goes with which character. So my character is always like the stuff that I read. My characters always have different voices. Is there any reason why I unlist my streams? Because there's a lot of streams. They happen every week, and the videos also happen every week. So they kind of clog up the video tab on the channel website, on the like the YouTube channel page. Yeah, it kind of clogs up everything else. So I just unlist the streams. You can still see them. Like if you go to the homepage on the channel site, you go all the way down and you can see a playlist of all the streams. Isn't Doraemon like the most powerful character in all of anime? Well, I guess. Yeah, he can reach inside his pocket and pull out anything that he wants, right? So he can probably pull out any weapons or anything that can just like defeat any character that he needs to defeat. You've been falling asleep to my videos? Oh, okay. Okay. So my voice makes you fall asleep. I gotcha. I gotcha. Slight dig, but okay. I get an A for effort at voicing 2 old men at the same time. How do you do different old people voices? I can only do one. I can only do one old person's voice. I think you gotta go like. You gotta go. Maybe you gotta tighten your throat and be like. At this moment, hello guys. I am an old man. You gotta sound like you're straining, like you're doing like push-ups or something. Dag nabbit. How do you do an old lady's voice? Dag nabbit. Get off my lawn. Okay. Anyways, that was weird. Yeah, those voice actors are really cool. Low and high old guy voices. How do you do a low old guy voice? How do you do a low old guy voice? Oh, I guess that is low. How do you do a high one? How do you do? How? Get off my lawn. Okay, I'm just gonna stop. I sound like a lame Pei Mai from Kill Bill. Thanks. Okay. This chapter today is gonna be it's a pretty big chapter, and it's a pretty important one too. Yeah, I think it's gonna be long also. It might be. But yeah. We will meet Dongfang Bubai, who everyone keeps talking about, right? Everyone talks about him. We'll see what he's like. Yeah, you gotta sound like you're constipated. I think that I'll keep that in mind. Like old person's voice, I just gotta keep in mind I gotta sound constipated. Okay, so let's do a recap of what happened last week. So last week, remember we had this guy named Shang Guanyun, okay? And he's a guy from the demon cult, and he was sent by Dongfang Bubai to go and capture Ling Hucheng, right? But as we saw, the capture was unsuccessful. So they failed, and then our heroes convinced him to defect. Okay, now he's on our side, or our heroes' side. So Ling Hucheng, Ying Ying, Ren Wuxing, and Xiang Wenqian, they hatched the plan to infiltrate the demon cult to go and attack, to ambush Dongfang Bubai. Okay, that's their plan. So they go, they disguise themselves. They pretend that Shang Guanyun did defeat Ling Huchong and capture him. Okay, so they pretend that Shang Guanyun captured Ling Huchong, and then they're bringing him to the demon cult to meet Dongfang Bubai. Okay, so they enter the demon cult. Everything was going as planned. They make their way through the cult, and they meet young Lian Ting, which is this one dude who is basically running the cult, while Dongfang Bubai is like hidden. Like no one has seen him for a long time. People only see this young Lian Ting guy, who seems to be his second in command, but he's basically running the cult. Okay. And this young Lian Ting guy seems to be very happy that they caught Ling Huchong, and then he brings them to meet the infamous Dongfang Bubai. And that's basically it. Yeah. So that's what happened last week. So this chapter is going to be pretty important. This is what you do on the 4th of July. Hey, this is what I do on the 4th of July. I got nowhere else to go. Yep, you can read it for free on web novels. Yeah. Look in the description. I have a link. So if you just want to go read it for free, you can do that. It's like a fan translation. All right. Oh, also, how's my audio? I think I have it fixed. I think it seems pretty good now. But let me know if it cuts out, or if it's too low, or if it's too high, or whatever. Okay. So remember what happened last week was, so they meet Dongfang Bubai, and then this one dude named Tong Bai Xiong, right? This Tong Bai Xiong guy is it's like a brother. Not it's like a He's not a actual brother, but like a brother in the cult. They're in the same cult. So he's like a good friend to Dongfang Bubai. Okay, and he goes, brother Dongfang, was it really you who sent people to capture me, right? And he seems to be really mad that his friend had just sent some people to capture him. All right, so chapter 31, embroidering. Young Lianting coldly said, this guy is supposed to be what? He has a deep voice, right? Tong Bai Xiong, how can you shout like that at the Hall of Refined Kindness? Why aren't you kneeling down when your chief is right in front of you? How do you dare not to sing praises to the chief? Tong Bai Xiong looked up into the sky and laughed loudly. When Brother Dongfang and I became friends, where were you, little kid? At the time when Brother Dongfang and I escaped death and went through all those hardships, you weren't even born yet. You dare talk to me? Ling Wuchong turned his head and finally was able to see the face of Tong Bai Xiong clearly. He has white hair, which was wildly out of place, and a bushy silver beard. His face was twitching with anger, his eyes were wide opened, and blood on his face was already darkened and hard. All these created a very scary facial expression. Both of his arms and legs were shackled with long chains that dragged behind him and rattled loudly as he spoke. He was speaking passionately, waving his arms around, and the iron chain accompanied his angry speech with a loud zheng zheng noise. Okay, so this guy's arms and legs are all shackled. Run Walsing was still kneeling down and staying still, but hearing the noise of the chain made, he remembered the time when he was locked up at the bottom of the West Lake. Remember now, Run Walsing is disguised, right? He's disguised as a regular minion. Him, Ying Ying, and what's his face? Xiang Wenqian. They're all disguised as just normal minions. He couldn't control his anger anymore, and his body was now shaking with anger, and he really wanted to start destroying things. But then he heard young Lianting say, "You're very arrogant to be so rude in front of our chief. You secretly colluded with that traitor, Ren Wuxing. Do you know your sin now?" "Chief Run is the former chief of our sect," Tong Baixiang said. "When he had an incurable illness, he retreated into seclusion and gave the leadership of the sect to Brother Dongfang. How can you say that he's a traitor to our sect? Brother Dongfang, tell us clearly, how did Chief Run rebel, and how did he betray our sect?" "After Run Wuxing cured his illness, he should have immediately returned to our sect. But he instead went to the Shaolin Temple and bonded together with the headmasters of Shaolin, Wudang, Songshan, and many other schools. Wouldn't you say that's betraying our sect? Why didn't he come to pay his respect to Chief and listen respectfully to the Chief's order?" Yang Lianting replied instead. Tong Baixiang laughed. "Chief Run used to be the superior of Brother Dongfang, and his experience in martial art is vast. So he's not necessarily under Brother Dongfang. Brother Dongfang, isn't that right?" Yang Lianxing shouted loudly, "Don't rely on your seniority here. Our chief is very generous to his subordinate, and he would never stoop down to your level. If you deeply regretted your fault, then tomorrow, in front of the assembly altar, you can tell all our brothers about your fault, your assurance to rectify your misdeed, and swear your loyalty to Chief. Then maybe Chief would spare your life this time. Otherwise, you know what is going to happen to you." Tong Baixiang laughed. "I'm close to 80 years old already. I'm already tired of living. What consequence am I afraid of?" Yang Lianting shouted, "Bring in those people." The servants in purple clothes answered, "Yes," and then they heard the sound of chains clunking as more than 10 people were brought into the hall. There were men, women, and a few children in the group. When Tong Baixiang saw this, his face changed color, and he used his qi to shout, "Yang Lianting, a gentleman is responsible for what he has done. Why are you bringing my grandson here?" His shout shook the eardrums of everyone in the hall. Ling Huchong, looking in the direction towards the dais where Dongfang Bubai was sitting, saw that Dongfang Bubai shook when he heard this shout. So he thought to himself, this person still has some conscience left. His heart was still moved when seeing how worried Tong Baixiang is. Yang Lianting laughed and said, "What's the third teaching of our chief? Say it out loud for us to hear." Tong Baixiang just uttered a few "peh" vehemently and didn't reply back. Yang Lianting said, "Among the Tong family, anyone who knows of Chief's third teaching, say it out loud." One boy who was around 10 years old said, "Refined scholar, kind-hearted warrior, the just and wise Chief's third teaching. You must be fierce towards your enemy and behead the source of trouble. Men, women, old and young, leave no one behind." Define dais. The dais is like the stage or a raised platform where the guy is sitting. So Dongfang Pubai is presumably sitting on a throne or a chair or something on a raised dais. Like a, yeah. So there's like a raised platform, right? Let's look that up. Yeah, a low platform for a lectern, seats of honor, or a throne. Yang Lianxing praised. Very good, very good. Little baby, you remember all 10 of Chief's teaching? The boy answered, I remember them all. If I don't study the teachings for one day, I wouldn't be able to sleep or eat. Once I've read Chief's teachings, my martial arts greatly advances and I have a lot of strength to fight. Yang Lianxing laughed. That is right. And who taught you these words? My father taught me. Who is he? He is my grandfather. Oh, wait. Who is he? He is my grandfather. Your grandfather doesn't read the teaching of our chief, doesn't listen to chief's words, and has betrayed our chief. What do you think we should do? Grandfather's wrong. Everyone must study chief's teaching and listen to what chief says. Yang Lianxing said to Tong Baixiong, Your grandson is only 10 years old, yet he knows what to do, while you're already so old. How come you're so foolish? Tong Baixiong said, I only exchanged a few words with those two people, Ren and Xiang. They wanted me to betray Chief, but I didn't agree to their proposal. When Tong Baixiong says one, when Tong Baixiong says one, then it'll be one. Two, then it'll be two. I would never wrong other people. He saw that all of his family was being held hostage, so his speech was getting softer as he spoke. Yang Lianxing sighed and in a regretful tone said, If you had said this earlier, then this wouldn't have become so troublesome. So, do you know your fault now? I wasn't wrong. I've never abandoned our sect, and I have never betrayed our chief. Yang Lianxing sighed. Since you don't want to admit your fault, then I can't help you anymore. Bring his family down, and don't give them a grain of rice or even a mouthful of water from today. A few servants in purple gowns responded, Yes, as they took the family away. Tong Baixiong shouted, Wait! Then he said to Yang Lianxing, All right, I admit my fault. It was I who was wrong. Chief, I beg for your forgiveness. Even though he had admitted his fault, his eyes were still burning, as if they were about to spout fire. Yang Lianxing smiled coldly. What did you say a moment ago? You said that when Chief and you experienced hardships, I wasn't even born. Isn't this right? Tong Baixiong held back his anger and said, I was wrong. You were wrong. That came out from you too easily. How come you aren't kneeling down in front of Chief? Chief and I have become sworn brothers sometimes in the past. For tens of years we have been standing and sitting down as equal. He suddenly raised his voice. Brother Dongfang, you see that your older brother is being tortured. How come you're not saying anything? If you want your brother to kneel down to you, that's very easy to do. You only have to say a word, and your brother will die for you without blinking an eye. Dongfang Bubai just sat still. All of a sudden, the big hall was quiet. Everyone was staring at Dongfang Bubai, waiting for him to speak. But even after some time had passed, he still didn't say a word. Brother Dongfang, for the past few years, it's been very difficult for me to see you. You locked yourself up and practiced the Sunflower Manual assiduously. Did you know that there were so many changes in our sect, and that danger is just around the corner? Dongfang Bubai just sat silently, without uttering a single sound. If brother wants to kill me, or torture me, I couldn't care less. But if you ruin the hundreds of years of power and prestige of our sect, then you will become a great sinner. Why aren't you talking? You fire deviated while practicing martial art so that you can't talk. Is this right? Yang Lianting shouted, Nonsense! Kneel down! Two servants in purple also shouted as they flew towards Tong Bai Xiong and kicked towards the back of his knees to force him to kneel. But their legs were broken instead, with loud cracking sounds. They fell down on the ground, and fresh blood spouted out from their mouths. That wasn't the correct sound effect, but you know. So they tried to kick the back of his knees to force him to kneel, but then they broke their legs instead. These two servants. Tong Bai Xiong said, Brother Dongfang, I want to hear you say something so that dying would be sweet. You haven't spoken for 3 years, and all the brothers in the sect are getting suspicious. Yang Lianting indignantly interjected, What suspicion? The suspicion that Chief has fallen into someone's plot and been given a muting drug. How come he doesn't speak? How come he doesn't speak? Tong Bai Xiong spoke loudly. Yang Lianting laughed coldly. Chief's every word is precious. Why would he waste his breath and speak to a traitor like you? Guards, take him down the cliff. 8 servants in purple. 8 servants in purple answered his call and came out. Tong Bai Xiong loudly said, Brother Dongfang, I want to take a look at you. Wait. Tong Bai Xiong loudly said, Brother Dongfang, I want to take a look at you. Have you been hurt so badly that you can't speak? He waved his arms around, and the iron chains on them scattered. With his 2 legs dragging the chains, he charged towards Dongfang Bubai. When the 8 servants saw how powerful he was, they were afraid to get near him. Yang Lianting shouted, Capture him! Capture him! The warriors outside the hall shouted their battle cries, but stayed just outside the door because they didn't dare to enter the hall. There was a strict rule in the sect, which stated that for anyone to step a foot inside the hall of refined kindness while carrying a weapon was an unpardonable offense that deserved execution. Dongfang Bubai stood up and turned around to go out through the back of the hall. Tong Bai Xiong called out, Brother Dongfang, don't go, as he quickened his steps. However, with the iron chains on his legs preventing him from walking fast, and his heart anxious with worry, he stumbled and fell forward. But he took advantage of the situation by somersaulting forward and then charged towards Dongfang Bubai. He was around 100 feet away from Dongfang Bubai when Yang Lianting shouted, Daring traitor is going to stab our chief! Warriors, quickly, come up the hall and capture this traitor. Run Wo Xing noticed that even though Dongfang Bubai was dawdling in his escape, Tong Bai Xiong was quite far away from him. He was still quite far away from him. He also wouldn't be able to catch up, so he pulled out 3 copper coins, moved his chi to his arm, and threw them at Dongfang Bubai. Ying Ying shouted, Let's move! Ling Huchong leapt up and pulled his long sword out from inside the bandage. Xiang Wenxian pulled out the weapons from inside the wooden poles of the stretcher and gave them to Run Wo Xing and Ying Ying. He then gave a mighty pull on the rope underneath the stretcher, which turned out to be a soft whip. Okay. No more disguises. They just came out. What's up, Abisab? Welcome to the stream. Oh, the fireworks are starting? Hey, that's cool. I wonder when the fireworks start here. It's only 6 o'clock here. I heard some fireworks yesterday in my neighborhood, though. The four of them immediately used their qinggong and charged up the hall. All of a sudden, Dongfang Bubai screamed as blood poured out. Dongfang Bubai screamed as blood poured out of the top of his head where he was hit by a copper coin. When Run Walsing threw those 3 coins, his distance from Dongfang Bubai was quite far away, so the power of the coin was already exhausted when it hit Dongfang Bubai's head, and thus only caused a light external injury. But Dongfang Bubai was praised to be the #1 martial artist in the entire world, and unexpectedly, he wasn't even able to avoid this little coin. This didn't make sense to anyone there. Run Walsing started laughing, and he called out, "Ho ho ho! This Dongfang Bubai is a fake!" Wait, he sounds like the other guy. Oops. Jiang Wenqian slashed out with his whip and coiled it around both of Yang Lianting's legs. He then pulled his whip taut and dragged Yang Lianting to the ground. Dongfang Bubai covered his face up as he ran away. Ling Hucheng moved to one side to rush forward and cut off his escape. "Stop!" he shouted as he pointed his longsword towards Dongfang Bubai. But who would have thought that Dongfang Bubai would be unable to stop and would keep on running towards the point of the sword. Ling Hucheng hastily withdrew his sword and sent his left palm out to strike him lightly. Dongfang Bubai immediately fell down on the ground with his face up. By that time, Run Walsing had also arrived. He quickly grabbed the back of Dongfang Bubai's neck and dragged him towards the hall entrance. In a clear and loud voice, he announced, "Everyone listen! This chap is a fake Dongfang Bubai who's trying to bring disaster on my divine sun moon sect. Everyone, look at his face clearly." Okay. Look at. Apparently, it's a fake Dongfang Bubai. From the appearance of this person, everyone could see that he actually resembled Dongfang Bubai very closely. But his frightened face was very different from the usual calm and confident attitude of Dongfang Bubai. Seeing this, all the warriors were greatly surprised and shocked that they were unable to utter anything. Run Walsing shouted, "What's your name? If you don't speak clearly, I'll crush your head." That person was quaking from fear, and he tremblingly stuttered, Servant is called..." Jiang Wenqian had already sealed many acupoints on Yang Lianting's body and had also dragged him to the entrance of the hall. He barked, "What's his name?" Yang Lianting replied without any fear, "Who are you to dare question me? I know you are the traitor Jiang Wenqian. The divine sun moon sect has already expelled you from the sect. Why did you come back to Darkwood Cliff?" Jiang Wenqian smiled coldly. "I came back to Darkwood Cliff to take care of your treachery." After he said this, his right palms hacked down and broke Yang Lianting's left shin bone. Yang Lianting's martial art was just average, but showing no pain, he scolded back. "Why don't you just kill me instead of torturing me? Is this what heroes do?" Jiang Wenqian laughed and said, "Do you think things would be that easy?" His palm descended again, and with a ka sound, Yang Lianting's right shin bone was now broken. Then, with his left hand, Jiang Wenqian shoved Yang Lianting to the ground. Both of Yang Lianting's legs had been broken, so when they hit the ground, the broken bones on his legs broke the skin and pierced upwards. The severity of the pain caused by this would be unimaginable, but Yang Lianting unexpectedly didn't utter a single word. Jiang Wenqian gave a thumbs up to him and praised, "Good man, I won't torture you anymore." He then lightly punched the fake Dongfang Bubai's stomach and asked, "What is your real name?" The fake Dongfang Bubai screamed loudly and answered, Servant is called Bao." "Your surname is Bao, is that right?" Jiang Wenqian said. Yes, Bao." He kept on mumbling for some time, but never actually uttered what his given name was. Suddenly, everyone could smell a stinky odor and saw that there was water flowing from underneath this fake Dongfang Bubai's pants. This fake Dongfang Bubai was so scared that he had actually urinated in his pants. We can't be delayed. Finding Dongfang Bubai is our first important thing to do, Renwo Singh decided. He then lifted Bao and bellowed, You've all seen clearly now. Our sect is infested by the likes of this guy who is pretending to be Dongfang Bubai. We must find out the truth. I am your true chief, Renwo Singh. Do you recognize me? All of the sect warriors were youths who were only in their 20s and had never seen his face before, so none of them recognized him. After Dongfang Bubai became the sect's chief, all of his trusted aides wanted to be in his good book, so they never mentioned the past matter of Chief Ren. That was why these warriors had never even heard of Renwo Singh's name. On the other hand, they thought that even though the Divine Sun Moon sect had been in existence for hundreds of years, Dongfang Bubai had always been the chief. They just looked at each other, not daring to utter a word. Zhang Guanyun said loudly, Dongfang Bubai was probably killed by Yang Lianqing and his cohorts. Chief Ren is our sect's chief. From now on, everyone must be loyal to Chief Ren. After he said this, he knelt down in front of Renwo Singh and said, Subordinate pays his respect to Chief Ren. Long live the chief, unifies the Jianghu. Those warriors knew that Shang Guanyun was a high-ranking officer in the sect. When they now saw him paying his respect to Renwo Singh, after witnessing for themselves how Chief Dongfang was replaced by a fake, how their powerful and awe-inspiring Yang Lianqing got his legs broken, thrown to the ground, and couldn't fight back at all, tens of those warriors immediately knelt towards Renwo Singh and said, Long live the chief! Unify the Jianghu! The rest of the warriors immediately followed suit. Having said, Long live the chief, unify the Jianghu hundreds of times, they unwittingly used the same words to address Renwo Singh. Renwo Singh laughed loudly, taking pride in himself. He then said, You must strictly guard the entrances to Darkwood Cliff, and don't let anyone go up or down from the cliff. The warriors acknowledged the order together. By then, Xiang Wentian had already ordered the servants in purple to release Tong Bai Xiong. Tong Bai Xiong was really worried about the safety of Dongfang Bubai, so he grabbed Yang Lianqing by his neck and shouted, You must have killed my brother Dongfang! He was feeling very agitated. His voice was choking, and teardrops started to fall on his cheeks. Yang Lianqing just closed his eyes and ignored him. Tong Bai Xiong gave him a whack on his ear and yelled, What happened to my brother, Dongfang? Xiang Wenxian hastily said, Lighten your hits. But it was too late. Even though Tong Bai Xiong had only used around 30% of his power, Yang Lianqing was already unconscious from the slapping. Tong Bai Xiong shook Yang Lianqing's body, but Yang Lianqing's eyes were all white and looked as if he had died. Renwo Singh said to the purple-gowned servants, Who knows of Dongfang Bubai's whereabouts? Quickly, report them. Quickly, report, then I'll heap you with gifts. He asked 3 times, but nobody answered. Suddenly, Renwo Singh's heart turned cold. While he was being imprisoned underneath the West Lake, besides practicing his martial art, he was also imagining how to torture Dongfang Bubai once he had escaped from that prison. But today, on top of Darkwood Cliff, all he found was the fake one. It seemed as if Dongfang Bubai had died some time ago. Otherwise, judging on Dongfang Bubai's subtlety and martial art, how could this Yang Lianqing manage to commit these evil acts and order someone to pretend to be Dongfang Bubai? What was the use of torturing Yang Lianqing and this idiot Bao. He looked at the servants in purple gown scattered throughout the hall. Some of them looked completely terrified, some looked frightened and confused, and there were some who appeared cunning and deceitful. Runwal Singh was extremely disappointed and was feeling impatient. He shouted, "You chaps, you must know this was a fake Dongfang Bubai and cooperated with young Lianting in deceiving the brothers in the sect. These are unpardonable sins that deserved deaths." His body swayed as he rushed towards them. Pa, 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 pa. These 4 soft sounds were heard as 4 servants in purple gowns were killed without being able to utter a single word. The rest of the servants were startled, and they started to scream in fear and ran for their lives. Runwal Singh laughed fiercely and bellowed, "Escaping? Escaping where?" He picked up the iron shackles on the ground, which were originally used to shackle Tong Baixiang, and tossed them at a cluster of people. Blood and flesh flew all over the place as 7 or 8 people were killed. Runwal Singh laughed loudly and said, "Ha ha ha! I will not let anyone who followed Dongfang Bubai live." Ying Ying saw her father was acting rather strangely, like he was mad, so she shouted at him, "Daddy!" She ran to him and pulled on his hand. Suddenly, one of the servants came out and knelt down. "Reporting to Chief, Dongfang Bubai didn't die." Jubilant, Runwal Singh ran up to that servant, grabbed his shoulders, and asked, "Dongfang Bubai didn't die?" "Yes." "Ah!" The servant fainted after screaming in pain. In his excitement, Runwal Singh had actually used too much strength and broke both of that servant's shoulders. Damn, this guy's strong. Runwal Singh shook the servant's body a few times, but he didn't wake up. Runwal Singh then turned his head to the other servants and shouted, "Where is Dongfang Bubai? Quickly, lead the way. If you're delaying me, I will kill you all." One servant knelt down and said, "Reporting to Chief, the location of Dongfang Bubai is a secret, and only young Lianting knows how to open the secret pathway. If we wake this young traitor up, he will lead Chief to where Dongfang Bubai is." Runwal Singh shouted, "Quickly, bring the cold water." These servants in purple gown were pretty clever. 5 of them immediately flew out of the hall, but only 3 people came back, carrying bowls of cold water, as the other 2 had run away. They poured all 3 bowls of cold water over young Lianting's head. He slowly woke up and opened his eyes. Xiang Wenqian said, "I admire your braveness, so I won't torture you anymore. Now, all the paths going up and down from Darkwood Cliff have been blocked, so there's no way for Dongfang Bubai to escape, unless he has a couple of wings to fly out. Quickly, lead us to find him. Why would a gentleman hide his face and only reveal his tail? Let's quickly decide this matter, so everyone can be happy." Li Anna, did he kill him? What do you mean, did he kill him? Did he kill who? That servant? No, I think he just broke that servant's shoulders. And the servant fainted, but he's not dead. He's not going to be happy when he wakes up, though. Yang Lianting smiled derisively. Chief Dongfang is matchless in this world. It's very good that you all want to go to your death. All right, I'll lead you to him. Xiang Wenqian said to Shang Guanyun, "Brother Shangguan, let's carry young Lianting to see Dongfang Bubai." He lifted young Lianting and dumped him on top of the stretcher. Young Shang Guanyun answered yes, and lifted the stretcher together with Xiang Wenqian. Young Lianting instructed, "Go inside." Xiang Wenqian and Shang Guanyun carried him in front to lead the way, while Runwal Singh, Ling Huchong, Ying Ying, and Tong Baixiang followed behind them. But this Tong Bai Xiong guy, he didn't seem to be that surprised that there was this ambush just happened. They went to the back of the Hall of Refined Kindness and passed through a long corridor before arriving at a flower garden. Then they entered a small stone house west of the garden. Yang Lianting said, "Push the left wall." When Tong Baixiang pushed the wall, it actually turned around and revealed a secret doorway. Inside, there was another metal door facing them. Yang Lianting pulled out a key and handed it over to Tong Baixiang. Tong Baixiang opened the door and discovered an underground tunnel beyond that door. They all headed underground. On both sides of the tunnel were oil lamps flickering dimly. Renwo Singh thought, "That bastard Dongfang Bubai locked me up under the West Lake. Who would have thought that he gets the same retribution and got himself locked up as well? This tunnel isn't any better than the one in Plum Manor on Mount Gu." But after they had made a few turns, suddenly there was a small open space in front of them, and they could see the bright sky. Instantly, the fragrance of flowers assaulted their noses, and they felt invigorated. As they came out of the tunnel, they discovered that they were in the middle of a small, delicate flower garden. Red cherry blossoms, green bamboo, green pines, and green jade cypress were planted artfully in the garden. Two young mandarin ducks were swimming leisurely through the small pond. There were also 4 white cranes standing beside the pool. Seeing such an unexpected lovely tableau, they all secretly admired the scenery. They went around a fake mountain and came into a large flower garden full of red and pink noses. Oh, wait. Noses. Red and pink roses. The roses smelled wonderfully fragrant and were delicately beautiful. Ying Ying turned her head slightly to look at Ling Hucheng. He had a smile in his face, and he looked very happy. She whispered, "Do you think this is a lovely place?" Ling Hucheng smiled. "After we kick Dongfang Bubai out, let's stay here for a few months. You can teach me how to play the qin, and we would be very happy." Ying Ying asked, "Are you deceiving me?" "I'm only afraid that if I don't learn it well, then Granny would blame me for that." Ying Ying sneered and broke into a smile. The two of them were enjoying the beautiful scenery and lagged behind the group. They saw Xiang Wenqian and Shang Guanyun enter a small, elegant house ahead. Ling Hucheng and Ying Ying quickly followed them and entered the house. As soon as they had entered, they could smell the strong fragrance of flowers. There was a painting of 3 beautiful ladies on the wall, while the chairs inside had flowery embroidered cushions. Ling Hucheng thought, "This is a lady's room. How could Dongfang Bubai be living in here? That's right, this must be his concubine's house. He's living in a gentle and soft village. That's why he doesn't care about the sex's matters." Alright, let's take a 5-minute break, alright? And I'll be right back. Alright, I am back. Hey Losh, glad you could join us. Okay. Oh, how do I do his voice? Okay, ready? We're about to meet someone important. A voice came from the inner room. Brother Brother Lian, who did you bring in with you?" The pitch of that voice was sharp and high, but at the same time still sounded coarse and rough. Whether it was from a man or a woman, that chilling voice would cause the hair on anyone's skin to stand straight up. Did I cause the hair on your skin to stand up? Yang Lianting said, It's one of your old friends. He said he just could not see you. Wait, he said he just couldn't not see you. The voice from the inner room spoke. Why did you bring him in for? Only you alone are allowed to come in here. Aside from you, there is no one else that I want to see. The last two sentences were spoken quite flirtatiously, clearly sounding like the words that would come from a woman, yet the voice undoubtedly came from a man. Ren Wuxing, Xiang Wentian, Ying Ying, Tong Baixiong, and Chang Guanyun were all well acquainted with Dongfang Bubai. This voice they heard was definitely his, but sounded more like someone who was purposefully squeezing his throat to raise the pitch, as if learning to sing, pretending to be charming and seductive. The whole scene just appeared as if it were a joke. The look on everyone's face was full of shock and bewilderment. I can't. If I didn't bring him in, he would have taken my life, young Lianting replied. How could I not see you once more before I die? The person in the room said in a sharp voice, Who would dare to insult you like that? Is it Ren Wuxing? Tell him to come out. Ren Wuxing, hearing that Dongfang Bubai was able to deduce that it was him based on a single sentence, dared not underestimate his intelligence. He signaled for the rest of them to slowly enter the room. Zhang Guanyun lifted one of the silk-embroidered curtains, carrying in Yang Lianting with him, while the rest of the group followed in from behind. Did I wash my hands? You decide. The inner room was layered with floral tapestries and brocade embroideries. A strong scent of perfume and powder filled the room. In the eastern corner, on top of a makeup table, a person was seated, clothed in exquisite pink robes. In his left hand was an embroidering apparatus, and in his right hand was an embroidery needle. The person lifted his head and had an astonished look on his face, but the look of confusion on this person's face could never match the look on the faces of Ren Wuxing and the others. With the exception of Ling Hu Chong, everyone recognized this person as the person who had usurped the position of chief of the Sun Moon sect, who for the past 10 years, or the past 10 or more years, held the distinction of being the unrivaled #1 fighter in all the world, Dongfang Bubai. But now he had shaved off all his facial hair, entirely covered his face in beauty powder, and was dressed in clothing that neither resembled a man or a woman. His eyes were eerie looking and appeared way too glamorously exaggerated and were just a pain to look at. What was this heaven-shaking, earth-shattering figure of the martial arts world doing in a woman's quarters, sewing? Ren Wuxing, who was originally filled with anger and rage, now couldn't help holding in his laughter. Dongfang Bubai, have you fallen insane? Dongfang Bubai, in his sharp voice, answered, So, it really is Chief Ren. You've finally come. Brother Lian, how are you? Is he the one who hurt you? He walked over to Yang Lianting's side and carried him over to a bed. Dongfang Bubai had an extremely caring and worried look on his face and asked, Does it hurt very badly? They're only broken shin bones, not very serious. You need not worry. I'll immediately help you start reconnecting the bones. He slowly undressed Yang's shoes and socks, pulled him across the fragrant bed covers and into his arms, exactly like a loving wife would do for her husband. Translator is getting better. A little better, a little better. There's still plenty of like grammatical errors, but it's not as bad as when he first started. Is he trying? So he was secretly a girl? No, no. He was male before. When all these people knew him, he was totally male. But now he's kind of both. But the question is why? Everyone present couldn't help but feel Everyone present couldn't help but feel shocked and slightly disgusted at what they saw. They all wanted to laugh, but the show of affection they witnessed were just too strange. Any laughter wouldn't even come out. Behind those elaborately decorative curtains, in that magnificent embroidery room, the air was filled with a quaint and unnatural aura. Dongfang Bubai pulled out a green silk handkerchief from his side and gently wiped off the sweat and dirt from Yang Lianting's forehead. Yang Lianting became slightly enraged and berated. A grave enemy is right in front of us. Why are you still wasting time with these useless pleasantries? Beat them away first, and we'll still have time for intimacy later. Dongfang Bubai giggled. Yes, please don't get upset. Your legs must be in great pain. Oh, it pains me to see you suffer. Renwa Singh, Ling Hucheng, and the others had never witnessed such a strange sight in their lives. They had never even heard of such a thing. Homosexuality or pedophilia was not out of the ordinary, but to see Dongfang Bubai, the exalted chief of the Sun Moon sect, actually dressed up like a woman and living in a woman's quarters, he must have gone insane. When Yang Lianting spoke to him, his tone of voice was harsh and threatening. Even so, Dongfang Bubai responded quite gently and refined, like an elegant lady. They all found this perplexing and figured something had to be amiss. Tong Baixiong couldn't help it anymore and took a step forward. Brother Dongfang, what the hell are you? Dongfang Bubai lifted his head as his expression sunk. Were you one of the people who injured my brother Lian as well? Why are you letting that nobody boss you around? He ordered some idiot to impersonate you and pretend to be you, issuing orders in your name and foolishly messing around with everything. Did you even know about this? Of course I knew. Brother Lian always had my best interest in his heart. He knew that administering the entire sect was too tiring for me, so he took over in my stead. There's nothing wrong with that. Tong Baixiong pointed to Yang Lianting. This person wanted me dead. Did you know about that? Dongfeng Bubai leisurely shook his head. I didn't know about this. But if Brother Lian wanted you dead, then you must have done something wrong. Why didn't you let him kill you? Tong Baixiong looked startled. After he regained his composure, he started to laugh. In his laughter, there was a certain hint of sadness. So, if he wanted to kill me, you just let him do so? Whatever Brother Lian wishes, I will oblige, Dongfang Bubai replied. He is the only one in this world who is truly good to me, and he is the only one in this world who I will be good to. Brother Tong, you and I have had quite a friendship, but you shouldn't have offended my brother Lian. Tong Baixiong's entire face flushed red. And I had thought that you had completely lost your mind. You still know exactly what you're talking about. You still remember that we were the best of friends, friends who braved life and death together. Of course, Dongfang Bubai said. If you offended me, I could care less. But you offended my brother Lian, and that is unforgivable. Well, I've already offended him. What are you going to do? That bastard wanted to take my life, but I don't think he has the ability. Dongfang Bubai extended his hand and gently combed his fingers through Yang Lianting's hair and asked gently, Brother Lian, do you want to kill him? Hurry up already! Stop dawdling around! You're starting to get on my nerves! Dongfang Bubai softly said, Yes. He turned to face Tong Baixiong and said, Brother Tong, today we are friends no longer. Please do not blame me for it. Before Tong Bai Xiong had entered this place, he had grabbed a blade from one of the dead servants outside. As soon as he stepped in, his blade was at the ready. He knew that Dongfang Bubai's martial prowess was exceptional. Although Dongfang Bubai appeared quite mad and out of his mind, Tong Bai Xiong still dared not let his guard down. He brandished his blade and took a defensive position. Dongfang Bubai smiled coldly and said, "Oh, must this be so difficult? Brother Tong, during that time on Mount Taihang, the 7 tigers of Ludong had me surrounded. I hadn't yet finished my training then, and was caught in an ambush by them. My right arm was severely injured, and I was certain that I was finished. If it weren't for you who came to my rescue, how could I have lived up to this day?" Tong Baisong asked, "You really still remember those times from the distant past?" "How could I forget? And during the time when I took control of the Sun Moon sect, Elder Luo of Sparrow Hall wouldn't submit to my rule, constantly nagging and complaining. It was you who dispatched Elder Luo with a single blow. It was from that day forth that not another person dared to speak up and question my authority. You definitely deserve much credit for that." Tong Baixiong replied resentfully, "I was quite foolish back then." Dongfang Bubai shook his head and said, "You weren't foolish, you were just being a loyal friend. I met you when I was only 11 years old. At that time, my family was poor and impoverished. Luckily, you came and gave us aid for many years. When my parents passed away, and we had no way to provide a proper burial for them, it was you who stepped in and took care of it for us." Tong Baisong waved away with his left hand and said, "Why bring up the past for?" "I just had to," Dongfang Bubai said. "Brother Tong, it's not that I don't value our friendship and have forgotten all that you have done for me. It's just that you have offended my brother Lian, and he wants me to take your life. I just can't do otherwise." "Enough! Enough!" Suddenly, a pink blur streaked across their eyes. It appeared to be Dongfang Bubai. They heard a clang as the blade in Tong Baixiong's hand fell to the floor as he swayed back and forth in a daze on his feet. Then they saw Tong Baixiong's mouth open widely as if his body fell forward straight onto the floor where it remained motionless. Although everything happened in only an instant, Runwo Singh and the others saw it clearly. The left and right Taiyang points above Tong Baixiong's eyebrows and the 4 Renzong points below his nose all had a small red dot on them as tiny drops of blood leaked out. It appeared that those points had been punctured by the sewing needle in Dongfang Bubai's hands. Runwo Singh and the others were shocked and took several steps backward. Instinctively, Ling Hucheng pulled Ying Ying behind him and shielded her with his own body. The room was filled with an eerie silence. No one even dared to take a single breath. The man really knows how to use his needles. Runwo Singh slowly unsheathed his sword and said, "Dongfang Bubai, congratulations on completing your training of the Sunflower Manual." "Chief Run, it was you who gave me this Sunflower Manual. I've never forgotten your kindness," Dongfang Bubai said. "Really? Is that why you imprisoned me under the West Lake, never letting me see the light of day?" "But I didn't kill you, did I?" Dongfang Bubai said. "If I had only instructed the 4 playfellows of Jiangnan not to give you water for about half a month, do you think you could have survived until now?" Runwo Singh sarcastically said, "Well, in that case, you treated me very well then." "Why, of course. I arranged for you to enjoy paradise in the West Lake of Hangzhou. West Lake is a world renowned for having some of the best scenery under heaven, and Plum Manor on Mount Gu is considered one of the best spots in all of West Lake." So, in fact, you were letting me retire in the lap of luxury in that dungeon under the West Lake. I should be thanking you instead, then. Dongfang Bubai sighed and said, Chief Ren, I'll never forget all that you've done for me. I was just a minor assistant under the Elder of the Wind and Thunder, the Elder of the Wind and the Thunder Hall. You were the one who went against convention and promoted me every year. You even presented me with our sex's most prized possession, the Sunflower Manual, and decreed that I would succeed you in the future as chief of the Sun Moon sect. I will always be grateful for the charity you have shown me. Ling Huchong looked down at Tong Bai Song's corpse and thought, before you were constantly praising all the good things that Elder Tong had done for you, then you suddenly struck out and killed him, and now you're bringing up all the things that Chief Run has done for you, but I doubt he'll fall for that same trick. But Dongfang Bubai's movements were just fast beyond belief, like a flash of lightning, a clap of thunder. There was no way to tell when he was going to strike. Such speed was definitely frightening. Ling Huchong lifted his sword and pointed it straight towards Dongfang Bubai's chest. As soon as any of his four limbs moved, he could easily stab forward. Only by taking the initiative could he hope to defeat this opponent. If he let Dongfang Bubai strike first, he would definitely end up dead. Ren Wuxing, Xiang Wenxian, Shang Wenyun, and Ying Ying were all focused intently on Dongfang Bubai, not even daring to blink an eye, because they knew that his attack could come at any time. Dongfang Bubai continued. At that time, I wanted only to become the chief of the Sun Moon sect, to reign for 1,000 autumns and 10,000 epochs, to unite the entire world. So I plotted arduously and fervently to usurp your position. But first I had to cut off your wings. Brother Xiang, it appeared that this plan of mine couldn't escape your attentive eyes. In the Sun Moon sect, besides Chief Run and I'd have to say that you are also quite a talent. Xiang Wenxian's hands were clenched tightly as he focused hard. He didn't dare to break his concentration with a reply. Dongfang Bubai let out a sigh and continued. When I first ascended to the position of chief of the Sun Moon sect, it was definitely glorious. I was showered with chants and praises of talented in the academics, gifted in the martial arts, for the prosperity of our divine sect. What undignified rubbish they were all spewing. It was only after I started to practice the Sunflower Manual did I realize that what was truly important in this life. After that, I started to diligently train my internal energy. Several years later, I finally understood the beauty of life, the myriad of all things. As all of them listened to his high, shrill voice speaking, their hands began to sweat. His words were definitely logical and coherent, extremely clear and to the point, but his strange, androgynous, neither male nor female appearance made them all shiver and cringe the more they looked at him. Oh, is he a wakashu? Androgynous, neither male nor female appearance. Dongfang Bubai's eyes slowly shifted towards Ying Ying. Dongfang Bubai asked, Young Lady Ren, how have I been to you these past few years? You've been very good to me, Ying Ying answered. Dongfang Bubai let out a sigh and said softly, I never say it, but I've always envied you greatly. Being born a woman is definitely 100 times better than being born as a rotten man. In addition, you're attractive and beautiful beyond compare, young and lively. If only I had the chance to switch places with you, forget about the leadership of the Sun Moon sect, I wouldn't even want the Emperor's throne. Ling Huchong laughed and said, If you were to switch places with Miss Run, then that means that I'd have to marry an old, twisted monster. I don't think that would be very easy to do. When Run Wuxing and the others heard those words escape his mouth, they were quite shocked. Dongfang Bubai's eyes glared at Ling Hu Chong. His eyebrows flared up as his face turned green. Who are you? How dare you talk to me like that? You've certainly got some guts. His tone of voice was sharp. It was definitely annoyed beyond repair. Although Ling Hu Chong was aware of the precarious situation that he was in, he couldn't help but laugh. And uttered, well, does it really matter whether they have a handsome young lad or a beautiful young maiden? What I resent the most are those shameless old men who dress up like women. Dongfang Bubai screeched back angrily. I'm asking you, just who exactly are you? My name is Ling Hu Chong. Dongfang Bubai's anger gradually subsided, and a smile broke on his face as he said, Ah, so you are Ling Hu Chong. I've wanted to meet you for some time. I've heard that Miss Run is totally enamored by you, to the point where she would be willing to cut off her own head for you. I had the impression that you must be a handsome, charming, and talented young gentleman, but the more I look at you, you seem quite ordinary and plain. Compared to my brother Lian, I'd have to say that you're off by a lot. Dongfeng is just ahead of his time. Yeah, he's living his best life, okay? These people just don't understand. He's very progressive. Ling Hu Chong laughed and replied, There really is nothing much good about me, only that I am true to my own feelings. Although that young buddy of yours is quite handsome, it's a pity that and quite disturbing that he likes withered old weeds coming here to... Dongfang Bubai stammered, You idiot! What are you babbling about? His entire face blushed red. Suddenly a pink blur of a figure flashed across the room. A needle flew directly towards Ling Hu Chong. Ling Hu Chong had intended on angering him by saying those words, but as he saw Dongfang Bubai's sleeves sway, he raised his sword and stabbed towards Dongfang Bubai's throat. That one sword stab was incredibly fast. If Dongfang Bubai didn't withdraw, that blade would have pierced through his throat. But at that same moment, Ling Hu Chong suddenly felt a slight pain on his left cheek. He swung towards his left in defense. Dongfang Bubai's speed was simply unimaginable. In that flash of an instant, he managed to prick Ling Hu Chong's face and then contracted his arm to block Ling Hu Chong's sword strike with his needle right afterwards. Luckily, that strike from Ling Hu Chong was incredibly swift as well. It forced his opponent to draw up a defense. Coupled with the fact that Dongfang Bubai was quite riled up and angry, the needle just slightly missed its mark, the Renzhong acupoint on Ling Hu Chong's face. The needle in Dongfang Bubai's hand was no longer than an inch, light enough to be blown away by the wind, light enough to float on water. Yet he was able to parry Ling Hu Chong's sword head on with it. Dongfang Bubai's martial arts level was definitely beyond comprehension. Ling Hu Chong was startled immensely. He knew that today he had run into a foe of unimaginable power. He knew that if he gave his opponent the leisure of the initiative, his life would be in grave danger. So, instead, he unleashed 4 quick stabs at Dongfang Bubai, all aimed at his vital spots. Dongfang Bubai cried out in surprise and remarked, Excellent swordsmanship! He parried to the left, to the right, above and below, and knocked away all 4 of Ling Hu Chong's attacks. Ling Hu Chong stared intently at Dongfang Bubai's movements. That tiny sewing needle blocked 4 of his strikes, yet showed not a single sign of wear or flaw. He didn't dare let Dongfang Bubai counterattack, so with a shout he hacked straight at his head. Dongfang Bubai held the needle in his right hand between his thumb and index fingers and simply lifted it upwards, stopping Ling Hu Chong's sword dead in its path, impeding it from striking downwards entirely. Ling Hu Chong's arm felt numb, but he saw a pink flare flash by, and a figure dashed towards him from his left. It was already too late to block and too late to avoid it. In the spur of the moment, his sword rose and flashed towards Dongfang Bubai's left eye as well. It was a move that would result in injuries for both sides. Stabbing towards an opponent's eyes was a very underhanded move, a move that experts never used. But the Dugu 9 swords that Ling Hucheng had mastered was formless to begin with. He was also quite a carefree person and never really thought of himself as a master. Also, in the midst of such danger, he had no time to care about rules and etiquette. But he suddenly felt another sharp pain near his left brow, as Dongfang Bubai leapt away and avoided his sword stab. Ling Hucheng realized that he had been pricked again by that needle in Dongfang Bubai's hands, but because Dongfang Bubai had to avoid Ling Hucheng's sword, his accuracy was a little off again and missed his target. Else, Ling Hucheng's one eye would have been instantly blinded. In a fright, Ling Hucheng's sword lashed out like a violent storm, wildly stabbing and slashing in every which way, making it extremely difficult for the opponent to have time to counter with a single move. Dongfang Bubai parried to the left and blocked to the right, yet still had time to leisurely praise, "Excellent swordsmanship! Excellent swordsmanship!" Run Walxing and Xiang Wenqian both saw that the situation was starting to get out of control. One brandished his sword, the other his whip, and both attacked Dongfang Bubai at the same time. The combined force of these three masters of the martial realm was certainly devastatingly powerful, but Dongfang Bubai, with a handful of needles in each hand, unleashed a flurry of pricks and pokes at the three of them. His movements were quick as lightning, and showed no signs whatsoever of weakness. Zhang Guanyun took up his blade as well, and joined in the flurry of attacks, making the battle a 4 against 1. After a brief moment in the confusion of battle, Zhang Guanyun cried out as his blade hit the floor with a clang. With a flip, he landed on the ground, writhing in pain over his left eye, which had just been blinded by Dongfang Bubai. Ling Hucheng noticed that Run Walxing and Xiang Wenqian were attacking Dongfang Bubai all out, and that Dongfang Bubai showed no intentions of attacking him, so his sword sprung into action, unleashing stab after stab at Dongfang Bubai, but his body was like a ghost, whirling in and out of sight, drifting about like formless smoke. The tip of Ling Hucheng's sword was always several inches off its mark. Suddenly, Xiang Wenqian cried out with an "ah," followed by Ling Hucheng, who gasped with an "hey," and the two of them had been struck by needles. Although the power of Run Walxing's art of essence absorbing was powerful and deep, Dongfang Bubai's movements were fast to the extreme. It was nearly impossible to catch. Secondly, his weapon was an embroidery needle. He had no way of absorbing his internal energy through it. After several more exchanges, Run Walxing cried out with an "ah" as well, his chest and throat both having been pricked. Fortunately, Ling Hucheng was unleashing an extremely fast attack at that time, forcing Dongfang Bubai to fend for his own safety. One of the needles missed its mark, while the other one did not penetrate very deep at all. Both attacks were unable to injure the opponent. The four of them had Dongfang Bubai surrounded and were attacking him all at once, and yet they hadn't even touched him yet, while all of them had already been pierced by his needles. Ying Ying, who was watching on the side, became increasingly worried. She thought, "I wonder if those needles are coated in poison. If they are, then we'd be in deep trouble." Dongfang Bubai's movements became faster and faster. His body spun around in a pink blur all over the room. Run Walxing, Xiang Wenqian, and Ling Hucheng were all panting and shouting in frustration and anger. All three of their weapons were infused with their internal energy. Winds of force rocked through the room, and not even a peep escaped from Dongfang Bubai. Ying Ying thought to herself, "If I throw myself into the battle, I'd only hinder their efforts and get in the way. What good would that bring? It appears that Dongfang Bubai still has the upper hand, even though it's a 3-on-1. From the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of young Lianting sitting on top of the bed, focused intently on the battle, his face full of concern. An idea crossed Ying Ying's mind as she crept towards the bed. Suddenly, the dagger in her left hand rose and stabbed into young Lianting's right shoulder. Young Lianting was caught by surprise and could only cry out in pain. Ying Ying then drew her sword and stabbed it into his thigh. Young Lianting realized what she was trying to do. She wanted him to cry out in pain to disrupt Dongfang Bubai's concentration. So he tried his hardest to endure the pain and hold it in. Not another sound escaped his mouth. Ying Ying became enraged and shouted, "Are you going to cry out or not? I'll cut off your fingers one by one." Her sword rose and sliced off one of the fingers on his right hand. Oh, damn. She's not playing around. Yang Lianting was indeed resilient. Although the pain was unbearable, he managed to keep his mouth shut. But the first cry that Yang Lianting gave out before had already reached Dongfang Bubai's ears. From the corner of his eyes, he saw Ying Ying beside the bed, slowly torturing Yang Lianting with her sword. With a shout, "Little witch!" a pink cloud of a figure darted towards the bed at Ying Ying. She withdrew at the very last second to avoid the incoming attack, but it wasn't clear if Dongfang Bubai's needles had struck their mark. Ling Huchong and Run Wo-sing saw the opportunity as both slashed their swords across Dongfang Bubai's back, and Xiang Wenxian snapped his whip violently towards Yang Lianting's head. Dongfang Bubai disregarded his own safety and stabbed his needle backwards into Xiang Wenxian's chest. Xiang Wenxian felt his entire body go numb as his whip fell to the floor. Right at that time, Ling Huchong and Run Wo-sing both plunged their swords through the back of Dongfang Bubai. Dongfang Bubai's entire body shook and then collapsed on top of Yang Lianting. Run Wo-sing was overjoyed as he pulled his sword out from Dongfang Bubai's back and pointed the tip at the back of his neck and said, "Dongfang Bubai, finally you've fallen by my hand." In the rush of heated combat, he hadn't yet caught his breath. Ying Ying was too shaken up by the fight. Her two legs became weak as she wavered back and forth and then fainted to the floor. Ling Huchong rushed to her side and caught her just as she fell. He saw a tiny gash of blood on her left cheek. Ying Ying said, "You've sustained quite a number of injuries too." She extended her sleeve and wiped across Ling Huchong's face. Her sleeve became stained with dots and streaks of red blood. Ling Huchong turned to Xiang Wenxian and asked, "Are your injuries serious?" Xiang Wenxian forced a laugh and said, "I don't die that easily." Blood gushed forth from the two fatal wounds on Dongfang Bubai's back. He cried painfully, Brother Lian, how cruel of these villains to torture you like this." Yang Lianting replied angrily, "You've always claimed that your martial arts was invincible. How come you can't even take care of these bastards?" Dongfang Bubai replied, I already... "You what?" "I've already tried my best. Their martial arts are quite strong as well." His body suddenly trembled as he rolled to the floor. Run Wo-sing was afraid that he would get up again, so he stabbed his sword into Dongfang Bubai's left thigh. Dongfang Bubai laughed feebly and said, "Chief Run, you finally won. I've lost." Run Wo-sing let out a hearty laugh and said, "You little sneak, do you think you can change what has transpired?" Dongfang Bubai shook his head and said, "I'm not trying to change anything. Since I've been defeated here today, I know that my life is over." His voice had been extremely high and sharp, but now it had sunk to a lower tone as he continued, "But if we had fought one-on-one, there is no way that you would have defeated me." Run Wo-sing hesitated for a second and then replied, "You're right. Your martial arts is definitely a higher level than mine, and that I truly admire. Dongfang Bubai went on. Ling Ho Chong, your swordsmanship is incredible, but if we fought one-on-one, you wouldn't be my match either. Ling Ho Chong acknowledged. That is true. In fact, the four of us combined wouldn't be able to overcome you. It was only because of your attachment to that person surnamed Yang that we were able to break your concentration and injure you. Your martial arts are at an unimaginable level. There is no one worthy of the title #1 fighter under the heavens other than you. In that sense, I truly have the most utmost respect for you. Dongfang Bubai slightly snickered and said, that the two of you are able to admit that. At least I know that you are true men with sincerity and integrity. Ay, what a pity, what a pity. Ever since I mastered the Sunflower Manual, I followed exactly what was written on that script. First, I had to castrate myself to train my chi, and then I had to refine pellets and intake herbs. Gradually, I lost all my facial hair, and my voice started to change. My temper started to change as well. After that, I was no longer attracted to women. I killed all 7 concubines that I had with me, and I put all my affection and care towards young Lianting. If only I were born a woman, then that would have been perfect. Okay, did you guys catch that? So the very first step was to castrate himself, to train his chi. Somehow that makes it better to train your chi, to castrate yourself. So either the Sunflower Manual, like either practicing that martial arts turns you like feminine, or castrating yourself turns you like feminine, which I don't think that's true, right? I guess castrating yourself reduces the amount of testosterone, but it doesn't make you feminine. Chief friend, I'm going to die soon. I beg one thing of you. Please, if you could take into consideration how well I've treated your daughter all these years. Renwal Singh asked, what is it? Dongfang Bubai requested, please spare young Lian Ting's life. Please just let him off the Darkwood Cliff. I plan to cut him into 1,000 pieces and torture him to death over the course of 100 days, cutting off a finger today, slicing off a toe tomorrow. Dongfang Bubai cried out, How can you be so cruel? Dongfang Bubai lunged up fiercely and suddenly at Renwal Singh. Because of his severe injuries, his speed was nowhere near as fast as it was before, but his attack was still astonishingly quick. Renwal Singh stabbed towards with his sword. Renwal Singh stabbed outwards with his sword. It penetrated the front of his chest and exited through his back. Just at that time, Dongfang Bubai flicked his finger. The needle in his hand shot out and pierced Renwal Singh's right eye. Renwal Singh withdrew his sword and leapt back. He took a deep breath and leaned his back against the wall. The impact caused nearly half the wall to collapse under his immense force. Ying Ying looked at her father's right eye and saw a needle embedded into one of his pupils. Fortunately, Dongfang Bubai had not much strength left in his hands, or else that needle could have punctured straight into Renwal Singh's brain. Although his life was not in danger, his right eye was permanently blinded. Yeah, so it was the cause of the sunflower thing. If Ying Ying studies it, oh yeah, what if Ying Ying studies it? Right? Wouldn't she be the most powerful fighter. None of that testosterone getting in the way. Ying Ying tried to get the needle out, but it was too short, and only a fraction of it was actually still sticking out of his eye, so there was no place for her fingers to hold on to. She turned around to pick up the embroidery frame that Dongfang Bubai threw away and pulled out a piece of thread from it. She then threaded it through the needle's hole and pulled it out. Ren Wuxing screamed in pain. The needle was hanging by the thread as blood dripped from it. Ren Wuxing was furious and gave Dongfang Bubai's corpse a fierce kick. The corpse flew up and hit Yang Lianting's head. Ren Wuxing used all of his power in that one kick as they clashed heads. Both Dongfang Bubai and Yang Lianting's heads burst open, spilling their brain matters everywhere. Ren Wuxing had been holding this big animosity for a long time. His leadership of the Sun Moon sect was usurped, and he had now been blinded in one eye. So he was feeling happy and angry at the same time. He laughed loudly towards the sky, shaking all the tiles in the house, but his laughter was full of anger. Shang Guanyun said, "Congratulations, Chief, for executing this big traitor. From now on, our sect would be sheltered under Chief's protection, and its power would spread throughout the 4 oceans. Long live the Chief! Unify the Jianghu!" Ren Wuxing laughingly scolded him. Nonsense! What long live? Nonsense! What long live? Suddenly he felt that if he could really live long and unify the Jianghu, then that would be the happiest thing in the world. He could not help laughing loudly at this. He laughed because he really felt happy and was feeling proud of himself. Xiang Wenxian used Dongfang Bubai's needle to pierce the acupoint on his left chest. In a moment, his whole body felt better, and his 4 limbs were able to move freely. He also said, "Congratulations, Chief! Congratulations!" Oh, you heard? It's not the same when a woman studies it. It has to be a castrated man. Well, that sucks. Why? Well, yeah, nothing ever comes easy, right? Your dad castrated pigs when he was a kid? Oh my goodness. Did you join him? Did you do it too? Okay. I guess you have to, right? You don't want them multiplying. But okay. Was it a farm? I assume in a farm you do want them multiplying. You do want them breeding, right? Ren Wuxing laughingly said, "You've done a great big service by punishing this traitor." He then turned his head around and said to Ling Hucheng, "Chong'er's contribution is also not small." Ling Hucheng saw the trace of blood on Ying Ying's white jade cheek, and fear still lingered in his heart as he remembered how fierce the fight was. He said, "If it weren't for Ying Ying attacking Yang Lianting, it wouldn't have been easy to kill Dongfang Bubai." He stopped for a moment and continued, "Luckily, his needle wasn't coated with poison." Ying Ying trembled when she heard this and softly said, "Please don't say any more. That person wasn't a man. He was a monster. When I was small, he used to carry me up the mountain to pick up vegetables and fruits. How greatly he has changed today." Tianbo Guang could study it. True. True. Ren Wuxing put his hand inside Dongfang Bubai's pocket and felt an old, thin page in there. He took it out and saw many tiny letters written on it. He waved that paper around and said, "This paper is a sunflower manual. It's written clearly in the beginning. To learn this divine art, castrate yourself first. I never be so foolish to do such a thing. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha." He then moaned deeply and said, "But this manual actually conveys a lot of profound martial arts, and anyone who manages to see it would definitely be tempted into learning it. Fortunately, I've learned the art of essence absorbing at that time. Otherwise, I'd probably have learnt the martial arts written in this manual." Oh, so there's a translator's note. In the third edition, the castration part was not mentioned to Ling Hu Chong and Ying Ying. This is to fix the later chapters when Ling Hu Chong and Ying Ying somehow forget about this. Okay. So I guess this is a prior version than the third version. So in this version, the Ling Hu Chong and Ying Ying do find out that castration was part of the process. But apparently, in a later version of the book, they did not find out until much later. What's a hermaphrodite? Yeah, you have both sets of equipment. He again gave Dongfang Bubai's corpse another kick. He laughed and said, "Ha ha, you were definitely crafty and sly, but you still couldn't have guessed my real intention in giving you the sunflower manual. You have such a wild ambition and bossy attitude. Do you think I wouldn't notice it?" Ling Hu Chang's heart turned cold, and he thought, so Chief Run actually had a bad intention in giving him the sunflower manual. The two of them were being crafty and were plotting against each other. He saw blood was still flowing out of Run Wall Sing's right eye, and his mouth was open in a mad smile. He looked completely mean and ferocious. Ling Hu Chang felt terrified seeing him. Run Wall Sing extended his hand and found out that Dongfang Bubai had indeed cut off his testicles. Oh, they actually confirmed it. He laughed madly and said, "Ha ha ha, this sunflower manual would be good for eunuchs to practice." Remember, the sunflower manual was originally written by a eunuch in the imperial court. He then rolled that old paper in both of his hands and ripped it into 1,000 pieces. He then hurled both of his hands open, and the pieces of paper were blown all over the place by the wind. Ying Ying let out a sigh and said, "It's best to destroy such a harmful thing." Ling Hu Chong laughingly said, "You're afraid I'm going to learn it?" Ying Ying's whole face blushed in a deep red, and she pursed her lips. She then said, "You're speaking improperly." Ying Ying then took out a medicine and applied it to her father's and Chang Guan Yun's eye injuries. Everyone's face was also full of uncountable needle holes. Ying Ying looked into the mirror and saw a trace of blood on her left cheek. Even though it was really thin, it would still leave a scar when it heals, and she didn't feel happy about it. Ling Hu Chang said, "You already have all the luck in this world, so the ghosts and gods would envy you. So this little scar on your face would definitely bring untold amount of good fortune." "What lucky thing do I have?" "You're beautiful and smart. Your martial arts is high. Your father is a divine sex's chief, and you yourself is admired by many heroes in this world. Furthermore, you're a woman that even Dongfang Bubai was jealous of." Ying Ying gave him a smile and forgot all about the injury to her face. Run Wall Sing and the four of them went out of Dongfang Bubai's little house, went through the garden tunnel, and went back to the hall. Run Wall Sing passed down a command ordering all the hall's elders and the fragrant masters to come see him. He sat at the chief's seat and laughingly said, "That servant Dongfang Bubai had many wicked schemes. He sat highly on the cliff and put a big distance between his subordinates and himself, so all of them were awed by him. What's this hall called?" Shangguan Yun replied, "Reporting to Chief, this hall is called Hall of Refined Kindness." This name came from the praise to chief, which says refined scholar, kind-hearted warrior. Renwa Singh laughed. Refined scholar, kind-hearted warrior, skilled with both pen and sword. That's not easy to do. He then beckoned to Ling Huchang. Chang'er, come here. Ling Huchang went in front of him. Chang'er, that day in Hangzhou, I invited you to join our sect. At that time, I had just escaped from my imprisonment and was all by myself, so you probably didn't believe all my promises to you. This time, I've already regained the leadership of the sect. The first matter I'd like to bring up is that old matter again. Renwa Singh said till here, where his right hand patted the chair next to him. Sooner or later, this position will be yours. Ling Huchang said, Chief, Ying Ying's kindness towards me is high, like the mountain. If you wanted me to do anything, I would never decline it. But I've already given my promise to other people to do another matter. So this one, of joining the divine sect, please forgive this junior for not being able to promise you this. Both the Runwal Singh's eyebrows were gradually raised, and he gloomily said, Do you know what's going to happen for not listening to my order? Alright. This is a good place to break for 5 minutes. Alright guys? 5-minute break. We'll be right back. And we're back. My voice is starting to go, you guys. Starting to go downhill. But we push on. Where were we? Yeah, he says, you know what's going to happen if you don't listen to my order. Ying Ying went up and pulled Ling Huchang's arm. Daddy, today is your big day. Why must you be worried about this kind of small matter? We can slowly talk about him joining the sect later. Renwa Singh turned his head slightly to the right and glanced sideways with his left eye towards the two of them. Ying Ying, you only want your husband and don't want your father anymore, right? Jiang... Excuse me. Jiang Wenjian laughed at the side. Chief, Brother Linghu is only a young hero, so he's still very stubborn. Let subordinates speak about it slowly with him. As he said till here, there were tens of people outside the halls calling out, Martial Hall Elders, Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters, 5 branches of Fragrant Masters and Vice Fragrant Masters have come to see the refined scholar, kind-hearted warrior, the just and wise chief. Chief flourishes the sacred sect and benefits the common people. Long live the chief! Unify the Jianghu! 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 Renwa Singh shouted, Enter! More than 10 men entered the hall and knelt in front of Renwa Singh. When he was the chief of the Divine Sun Moon sect, he only cupped his fist in saluting the brothers in the sect. So, when he saw them kneeling down, he immediately stood up and waved his arm. There is no need. Suddenly, he thought, It's not sufficient to receive these people without power. In the past, my leadership of the sect was usurped by traitors because I treated them too leniently. Since Dongfang Bubai already introduced this kneeling as propriety, then I don't need to change it. He immediately cupped his fist back at them and didn't say anything as he sat down. Not long after that, another group of people entered the hall. Oh no, he's letting it get to his head. He's letting his ego get to his head. When they knelt before him, Runwal Singh did not stand up anymore and just nodded his head. At this time, Ling Huchong had already retreated to the entrance of the hall and was far away from the chief's seat. Under the dim light of the hall, Runwal Singh's face looked blur from where he was. Looked blur? You mean looked blurry? He thought, there's no difference whether Runwal Singh or Dongfang Bubai is sitting in that seat. He then heard the praises of all the hall leaders and fragrant masters getting louder and louder as they went, and they all sounded like they were afraid of Runwal Singh. For the past 10 years, they had been working their best for Dongfang Bubai, so it was unavoidable that they were feeling guilty towards Chief Run. They didn't know how Chief Run would punish them if he brought up the past events. Furthermore, some of them had never known of Runwal Singh before. Some of these people only knew how to work hard for Dongfang Bubai and Yang Lianting to avoid being punished. So, when there was this sudden change of leadership in the sect, all they could do was sing their praises to the new chief. Ling Huchong stood at the entrance of the hall with the sun shining down on his back. Outside the hall was clear and bright, while there were close to 100 people prostrating themselves on the floor inside the hall, singing their disgusting praises. He couldn't say his loathing out loud, so he thought, Ying Ying treats me very well, so if she really wants me to join the Divine Sun Moon sect, I can't reject her idea. But it has to wait until I go to Songshan and stop Zhu Langchan from becoming the headmaster of the Five Mountains Sword Schools, of the Five Mountains School, since this was my agreement with Great Master Fang Zhang and Priest Chong Shu. Also, I have to find a female disciple from Hangshan and pass down to her the leadership of the school. After all these are done, then I'll be free to join the divine sect. But if you want me to be like these people, isn't that too disgusting? Later, when Ying Ying becomes my wife, he's already thinking about the future, then Chief Run would be my father-in-law, and it would only be proper if I kowtow to him. But all these flourishes the sacred sect and benefits the common people. Refined scholar, kind-hearted warrior, the just and wise, they're just too shameful for a real man to utter. They really tarnish the pureness of a real man. I originally thought that this nonsense was done by Dongfang Bubai and Yang Lianting to punish someone, but looking at the situation now, Chief Run is actually flattered to hear these words, and he's not disgusted at all. He again thought, that day in the Cliff of Contemplation on Huashan, I saw the martial arts of the 10 elders from the Devil sect, and they actually had many heroes among their seniors. If not so, how could the Sun Moon sect fight against the orthodox parties for the last 100 years and still be their equal? From the warriors they have, like Brother Xiang, Shang Guan Yun, Jiabu, Tong Bai Xiong, the 4 playfellows of Jiangnan, which one isn't an outstanding gentleman? These groups of people are all forced to kneel to other people every day and read aloud those dictions while they're actually cursing in their hearts, saying disgusting things and receiving such rudeness. Actually, accepting to say those shameless things is even more disgusting. All these wronged heroes, how could they still be called heroes? Yeah, fragrant masters. What does that mean? Like they smell good? Like they put on fragrances before they enter the hall? What does that mean? He then heard Runwal Singh being pleased with himself say loudly, You were all under Dongfang Bubai before, and have done many things for him. I've secretly found out what every single one of you has done, but I'm a very open-minded person, so I won't blame anyone. From today, everyone must be loyal to me, then I would treat you well and share all the glory and honor. In a blink of an eye, the hall was drowned in praises. Everyone was saying the chief was just and wise. His heart was open like the ocean, and that a big man doesn't do what a small man does. They also said they would obey Chief's order completely, be loyal to him, to go through fire and water, would not balk at 1,000 deaths, and be resolved to do the Chief's biddings. Run Wal Sing waited for them to say their praises until they gradually became quiet. Run Wal Sing continued, "But if anyone dared to revolt and not listen to my order, then I will punish him severely. Whoever commits this sin, then his entire family would be executed." All of them answered together, "Subordinates would never dare. Ling Huchang quivered when he heard these words and was really afraid. He inwardly thought, Chief Run is just the same as Dongfang Bubai. He's using fear to control the sect. Everyone is very deferential towards him, even though they're actually angry and full of rejection in their hearts. How can they be said to be loyal to him? Some people then started to reveal Dongfang Bubai's faults to Run Wal Sing. They told him that Dongfang Bubai was offended by honesty, how he only listened to young Lianting, how he killed many innocent people, how he was selfish in giving gifts and punishments, how he loved to hear praises, and how he ruined the sect. A lot of that is probably not true, right? Remember, Dongfang Bubai didn't like those praises, right? I think they told us before that he wasn't really fond of those all those like over the top praises. There were also he was guilty of love, you guys. That's what he was guilty of. There were also some people who said that he ruined the sect's custom by giving out the dark command wood to anyone, and that he forced people to take the divine 3-corpse brain pill. Other people said that he drank and ate extravagantly, that every time he ate, he slaughtered three cows, 5 pigs, and 10 sheep. Ling Huchang thought, how can one person eat that much? How can he eat 3 cows, 5 pigs, and 10 sheep? He must have eaten together with his friends and subordinates. How can slaughtering cows and sheep be considered a big sin when Dongfang Bubai was chief? But he then heard everyone keep on bringing up Dongfang Bubai's other faults more and more, and each fault was getting even more trivial. Some people scolded him for being very moody. Some people scolded him for loving to wear a flowery gown and not coming out to meet them. That's probably true. There were also people who said that he was very thin-skinned and silly. Another person said that his martial art was lowly, always frightened during battles, and he in fact had no real abilities at all. Ling Huchang pondered. You're all scolding Dongfang Bubai for all sorts of things. Even though I don't know whether what you're saying is true or not, I know that when the 5 of us fought him, we barely escaped alive with our lives and almost lost our lives under his needle. If Dongfang Bubai's martial art were low, then there's no one in this world who has a high martial art. You're really just spouting nonsense. He again heard another person say that Dongfang Bubai was very lewd and just forcefully grabbed any girls he wanted. Definitely not true. He had also offended many married women in the sect and had also many babies from these affairs. Definitely not true. Ling Huchang thought Dongfang Bubai had already learned this really strange sunflower manual and castrated himself a long time ago. What nonsense of lewd affairs and making lots of babies are you talking about? He thought till here when he actually laughed really loudly, unable to restrain himself any further. This loud laughter was heard from afar. Everyone in the long hall turned their heads around to have a look and glared angrily at him. Ying Ying knew that he was causing trouble, so she quickly rushed over and pulled on his arm. Brother Chong, there's nothing to see here. They're only talking about Dongfang Bubai's stuff. Let's go down the cliff and have a look around. Ling Huchang poked his tongue out and laughingly say, We don't want to make your daddy angry. The two of them walked out of the hall shoulder to shoulder, passed through that white jade decorated archway, and went down using the bamboo baskets. The two of them leaned close to each other inside the bamboo basket as they went down. They saw the light mist around them and felt as if they were floating. It was as if they had gone to another world compared to the situation inside the hall. Ling Huchong looked up to the top of the dark wood cliff and saw the golden reflection of sunlight from the writing on the white jade archway. He felt pleased. I finally left that place. The things happening last night were like a nightmare. From now on, I'd never set foot on Darkwood Cliff ever again. Brother Chong, what are you thinking? Can you be together with me? Ying Ying's face blushed red, and she said, We. What? Ying Ying lowered her head and said, We're not married yet. How can I follow you? Didn't you go around Jianghu with me before? That was because I had to. Also, that's why a lot of rumors are flying around. Just then, Daddy said I want to be with you and don't want him anymore. If I go with you, then Daddy would definitely be unhappy. Daddy was also imprisoned for more than 10 years, so his temper isn't good, so I want to accompany him. As long as your heart is faithful, then in the future, we can accompany each other. The last few words that she said were really soft that they couldn't be heard. By coincidence, a white cloud floated by them, wrapping around the bamboo basket and the two of them. Ling Huchong could only blurrily look at Ying Ying. Even though Ying Ying was leaning close beside him, he couldn't see her appearance clearly, and it was as if she had been carried out by the cloud, and he couldn't touch her. When the bamboo basket reached the bottom of the cliff, they stepped out of the basket. Ying Ying whispered, You're going to go now? Zhuo Longchan has invited the 5 mountain sword schools to come to a meeting on the 15th of the 3rd month to elect the headmaster of the 5 mountains school. He's very ambitious and would bring disaster to all the heroes in this realm. I must go to this gathering on Songshan. Ying Ying nodded her head and said, Brother Chong, Zhuo Longchan's sword art isn't your match, but you must guard against his plotting. Ling Huchong replied, Yes, I should go with you, but I'm only a witch from the Devil's Sect, so if I were to go with you to Songshan, then I'd just hinder you there. She stopped for a moment before she dispiritedly said, When you become the headmaster of the 5 Mountains School, your reputation would be well known in this world. Our 2 paths of orthodox and demonical are irreconcilable, so it's going to be even more difficult for us. Ling Huchong held her hand in his and softly said, You still don't believe me? Ying Ying mournfully laughed. I believe you. After some time, she quietly said, When someone practices his martial arts, it would get higher and higher, and his reputation would also get bigger and bigger. I felt that often that person would also start to change. He himself might not know it, but his treatment of matters would be totally different than before. Uncle Dongfang was like that, and I'm worried that Daddy might be like that too. Ling Huchong smiled. Your father wouldn't go and learn the martial art in that sunflower manual. That manual had already been destroyed by him, so even if he wanted to practice it now, he wouldn't be able to. I'm not talking about martial art. I'm talking about someone's temperament. Even if Uncle Dongfang didn't learn the sunflower manual, he would still kill and rob. Once he usurped the leadership of the Divine Sun Moon sect, he would have naturally become conceited. Ying Ying, there's no harm in worrying about other people, but there's no need to worry about me. I'm born in this carefree attitude and would never be like that. Even if I were to become conceited, I would always be like this in front of you. That's good then. Suddenly, Ling Huchong thought of something and said, Everyone in the world already knows about the 2 of us. Those friends that you sent to the island in the South Sea. Can you let them come back now? Ying Ying smiled and replied, I've already sent people to bring them back to the Central Plains. Ling Huchong pulled her close to him and lightly hugged her. it's goodbye for now. Once that matter in Songshan is settled, then I'll come back here to look for you. Then we'll never be apart again. Ying Ying's eyes flashed happily, and she lightly said, if only all your matters go smoothly, then we can meet earlier. I'll wait here and look out for you every night and every day. All right. Ling Hucheng then gave her a kiss on the cheek. Ying Ying's face turned red with bashfulness and pushed him away. Ling Hucheng laughed loudly and led his horse away as he went away from the Sun Moon sect. Done. Ta-da! That was a long one, right? Did you guys like that? So poor Dongfang Bubai. We've heard so much about him. They've built him up so long, for so long, and he only lasted one chapter. What the hell? Yeah. Did you guys feel sorry for him, or were you like, whatever? You're like, he deserved it. He deserved it. He didn't seem that bad. Yeah, like I said, his only crime was being in love. Okay, so he's dead. Runwal Singh is now the leader of the Sun Moon sect, or the demon sect. And he seems to be worse than he was before. Okay? He seems to be taking this power. He seems to be letting all the power go to his head. So, but we'll see what happens. So now Ling Hucheng is gonna go to that place where they're gonna vote for who's gonna be the leader of the five. Wait, what is it? The 5 sword schools. What did they call it? The 5 mountains school. Yeah. You felt sorry for him? Oh. You think Dongfang Bubai is your favorite though? Yeah. Yeah, he's pretty cool. Living his best life, right? Yeah, he's very progressive. Bravehorn. How do you make a one-time donation? Ah, don't worry about it. If you can't figure it out, don't do it. I'm just glad you enjoy the videos. He did make a big impact, yes. And we did learn about the secret of the sunflower menu. You gotta chop off your thing. Chief Run should have just spared that harmless guy in deference to Dongfeng. Yeah, Chief Run was a little too angry. He's like, but you gotta look at it from his point of view, right? He was imprisoned for like more than a decade. All right, so he must be really mad at this Dongfeng guy, and he was usurped. Right, his leadership was usurped, so he's probably really mad, and he was probably looking forward to this battle for a long time. So you can kind of understand why he's so angry. All right, let me take a drink, and then we can end this. Oh, we're almost finished. Hey. Almost finished. You thought they would find a way to lock him in his happy house? Nope. Happy endings don't happen in the real world. Oh, actually, I'm gonna finish it. Oh, hey. All right. All right, guys. Cheers. Okay. What am I drinking? I'm not a wine dude, so this is a Zinfandel. Yeah, whatever that is. All right, it's a red wine. Do do do. But this is a novel. It is a novel. You going to sleep? Well, good night. All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming. Glad you enjoyed the reading, and I love you. And I'll see you next time. All right. Bye. Oh, I have liquor for next time. Don't worry about that.